Welcome, welcome, welcome to episode 105 of the show with no name. I'm your humble host, Nick, and today we're going to be exploring another little old farmer cemetery out here in the middle of nowhere in Lincoln County, Washington. This cemetery goes by the name of the Peach Cemetery. I have a lot to say about this cemetery and not a lot of time, so let's get into this. I'm going to start this episode off today talking about a man whose name was Abram Ensley, and this is his headstone right here. Abram Ensley was born on February 10th, 1833 in Indiana. He would later move to the Big Bend area. The Colfax Gazette on April 4th, 1902 reads, Abram Ensley, a pioneer of the Palouse country, but who for several years has resided in the Big Bend country, died at Creston, Washington on March 26th of blood poisoning after suffering for 7 weeks. While handling ice during the winter, Mr. Ensley took cold and a sore on his hand, and blood poison developed, soon affecting his arm, then his leg, and later his entire body. His family was against amputating his arm, which the physicians regarded as the only chance of saving his life. Medical skill could not stop the spread of the infection. Mr. Ensley left behind a widow and 5 daughters. His wife's name was Sarah Ensley. This is a picture of his wife, Sarah. The town of Peach was officially established on February 11, 1898, with the establishment of their first post office building. George B. Young was a postmaster out here in the town of Peach, and this is his headstone right here. Not only was he a postmaster in the town, but he also ran a store out here. The town of Peach was one of a number of old towns located down on the sandy bottom of the Columbia River. It got its name from all of the orchards they had down here. They grew peaches, plums, apricots, pears, apples, and cherries. This cemetery here, Peach Cemetery, was put here in present-day Lincoln in 1904. By 1917, the town of Peach had 40 families numbering around 300 people working the orchards and living down here. In 1939, the town of Peach was no more, due to the Grand Coulee Dam and the raising of the water for Lake Roosevelt. I have some historical photos that I'm going to show you guys briefly. This right here is an aerial photo of the old town of Peach, and as you can see, there were a lot of orchards and stuff like that here. And this was before they flooded the area, because all of this is underwater now. And here's a photo of them moving somebody's house out of the area, and they burnt their orchards down and burnt a lot of their remaining properties down and kind of just left the area to make way for the big Lake Roosevelt that was coming through. And of course, the government paid them all to leave as well. I can't remember exactly how much each farmer got per acre, but I know they got bought out as well for this project. The raising of the water for Lake Roosevelt didn't only displace the town of Peach, but it displaced a number of other towns, including Keller, the town of Lincoln, and Jerome, to name a few. Many Native American burial grounds also had to be moved, and a few farmer cemeteries from the old town of Peach were also relocated to this cemetery here. Those were called the W.L. Brannan Cemetery and the W.H. Balcom Cemetery. So this cemetery that we're looking at today is actually 3 different cemeteries combined. I'm going to spend a few moments talking about the Denny family now. This is William and Mary Denny and their children photographed here. And this is William's headstone out here at Peach Cemetery. The Peach, Washington obituary reads, William Harrison Denny, aged 86, whom homesteaded west of Medical Lake 42 years ago when Spokane and Medical Lake were struggling villages competing for county seat honors, died last week on a visit to Peach, Washington. Mr. Denny homesteaded on land now occupied by Denny Station and lived there for 16 years but spent much of his life at Medical Lake. After 16 years at Denny Station, he lived at Nez Perce for 4 years, where his wife passed away there and she was not buried here with him. Mr. Denny had 14 children, 52 grandchildren, and 48 great-grandchildren. Mr. Denny was born on October 5th, 1836 in New York. He was married on November 3rd, 1856, to Mary Jean Kern. I also find it pretty interesting that even though William had a large family, he was the only one in his family buried out here in this cemetery. And these are just a couple photos of some of his children that he had, that they grew up and lived their own lives and went other places. I'm going to finish this episode today talking about the Hill family. This is John and Alice Hill, and they lived out here in the area, and they were also buried here at Peach Cemetery. And now I'm going to read a biography about John that his great-granddaughter wrote that I found online. John Richard Hill was born on May 1st, 1855, in Warsaw County, Missouri, the oldest son and second child of William Buell and Brunette Dickerson Hill. At age 20, he met Alice W. Thompson, born February 21st, 1858, in Clermont County, Ohio, daughter of John Thompson from New Jersey and Anne Thompson, originally from England. John and Anne moved to Benton County, Missouri in 1872, when daughter Alice was 14. John Thompson died in Missouri in 1872, And in 1877, as a widow of John Thompson, Ann Thompson applied for a land patent on 160 acres. She sold this, and with her son Henry Thompson and daughters Amy and Nell, she moved to Washington State. Ann Thompson died February 2nd, 1892, and is buried in the Wilbur Cemetery. John Richard Hill and Alice E. Thompson were married on March 9, 1876 in Warsaw County, Missouri. They moved to Cross Timbers, Missouri and Hickory, where all their children but the youngest were born. They were William Thomas, James Alfred, Nellie Mae, Henry Clinton, Homer, and Charles Edward, born at Peach, Washington, moving by immigrant train. John Richard and Alice E. arrived in the spring of 1884 at Deep Creek, Washington, where they stayed for several years. In 1891, John Hill purchased a land patent for 160 acres located halfway between Elmira and Wilbur, north of Highway 2, west of Govan. In 1899, he purchased another land patent for the adjoining 160 acres. In the town of Wilbur, John started a sawmill and opened up a lumber yard with another man. In April of 1895, he purchased lots 5 and 6 in Block 111 in the railroad addition to the town of Wilbur for $60 from George E. and Susanna Terry. He hauled some materials there and helped build the Wolf School, made of logs, which was located northeast of Elmira. The school would open on August 22, 1888. John would eventually sell his holdings and move to Peach, Washington, also known as Orchard Valley, in June of 1895, and in Alice's name, for the sum of $669, they bought a 16 3/4 acre lot just above where Hawk Creek came into the Columbia River. They would plant an orchard in 10 of the acres, and the less productive ground was turned into pasture and used the waters of Hawk Creek for irrigating. By 1903, the Hill family had built up their farm into a very prosperous one. By this time, sons Homer and Charlie were still at home, but others were starting out life on their own. Jim and Will bought their own fruit farms at Peach. Daughter Nell would get married in February of 1899, and they bought a farm to raise fruit also. Henry married a woman named Grace Snook in May of 1903, and they had a fruit farm halfway between his father's place and his brother Jim's place. In January 1904, his son Charlie Edward died of appendicitis and was also buried at Peach Cemetery here. In 1911, John and Alice would buy 160 acres in Fruitland Valley, originally known as Price's Valley, about 40 miles north of Peach. It had a log house on it, but they built a 3-room house with an upstairs and used the original log house for storage. Henry moved to Fruitland Valley and helped his father with the farm, as did Homer. His daughter Nell and her husband would also move to Fruitland Valley and purchase 160 acres of property with a house on it. They improved the house and barn and put in an orchard. John would move to Opportunity, Washington years later, where he died on March 5, 1922. Alice would pass away on April 1st, 1924, and both are buried here in the Peach Cemetery in Lincoln County, Washington. John and Alice Hill were both members of the Methodist Church, of which William B. Hill, John's father, was a minister. This is definitely a story of a family that got displaced by changing times. Because, like I've been saying, the Hill family They had a lot of land and orchards down here in Peach, and they all ended up having to leave, which is pretty sad. I hope you enjoyed Peach Cemetery. Thank you.